All right, we're back. The
We're
internet took
back.
us out. Cool, cool. But yes, happy Friday. Again, thank you for coming onto the platform. It's about to be a great discussion. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm super excited. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Everything that you're doing with finance is super, super dope. How did that start with having like a passion for travel, starting a blog, all that good stuff? How'd that start for you?
Yeah, so my passion for travel was instilled in me even at a very young age. I was,
Mm,
really blessed to have a family that took me on vacations and really kind of planted those seeds of wanderlust in me as even a little girl. And then,
mm,
as I got older, I think I just naturally started finding opportunities to be able to travel, whether that was like through like youth programs coming up in Baltimore City, where I'm from, or in college when there would be other fellowships and study abroad programs, right? So by the time I got to college, it was like, okay, I know that I want travel to be a part of my lifestyle.
mm.
How do I do it, right? I toyed with the idea about being a foreign service officer, right? I thought about a lot of different career paths that could allow me to have like international exposure, but it really wasn't until I was working full time and really struggling with my own money that I realized a lot of people are probably in the same boat as I am, right? Living paycheck
Yes.
to paycheck, living beyond our means, having
Mm,
debt that is not serving us, right? Like,
mhm.
because I do think that there is a potential to have debt that can actually help you get closer to building wealth, cash flowing assets, right? That was
Yes.
not what I was doing, right? Living beyond my means, living off of credit cards was not
Mm,
it, right? So, um, when I would travel, and I wasn't always financially savvy
mm.
traveler, people would always be in my DMs like, how do you do this? How do I afford to do this? Right. And that was what started to click to me that, okay, maybe there's something here. Right.
Mm.
And feeling like a conversation was missing, right? In the
Yeah.
personal finance community, I just felt like there was a lot of advice that was around shame, right? Like,
Mm.
you should be ashamed to be in this much debt, therefore not traveling, right? Ever.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, right, following dope travel influencers who almost never talked about money, would show all these amazing places, but wouldn't tell you, oh, I'm staying at a place that costs $4,000 a night. I'm here because they invited me out here.
Wow.
This is not something y'all can actually do, right? So I created FlyNanced to really answer those two calls.
Mm.
But I'll be really honest, when I started FlyNanced, I had a lot of imposter syndrome. I had a lot of
Mm.
doubt. I had to work through a lot of ish to get to this point, to be
Yeah.
able to talk confidently, to share my story
Mm.
without, all the traumas
Mm.
and things that I carried around my own money. And honestly, how much finance has grown in a short amount of time is really just a testament that some higher power wants my voice to be here, right? Because
Love
I had no idea that my
mm.
community was going to grow the way that it did, that I would have this kind of platform.
Mm.
Literally in a year. I mean, I really started going ham with finance January 2020, documenting my debt-free journey.
Mm.
Um, and it's about a year later, and I'm here. So
Mm.
I'm just really grateful, and I think and I hope that my story can continue to uplift other people, that no matter what money mistakes we have, no matter what environments we grew up in that may not have been wealth minded, that
Mm.
doesn't mean that wealth can't come from us.
That's facts. I love that. And you've done something that's super inspiring. You monetize something that you're like truly good at, passionate about. For young creatives right now who are at home and frustrated, who could be creative, how do you monetize what you are passionate about? How do you do that?
Yeah, so I will be really honest. I focus on building a community and being
Mm.
authentically me,
Mm.
and the monetization side came after that, right?
Mm.
um I feel, in just my personal experience, when
Yeah.
I've seen people who have come up and built these huge followings and tell people, oh, I made six figures in 90 days and those
Yeah.
kind of stories, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's always this element of inauthenticity that people
Mm-hmm.
will pick up on,
That's
right?
facts. Yep.
And I think for me, being someone who, at the center of everything that I do, it is really about creating access, educating,
Mm.
uplifting, and inspiring, not to make a quick sale.
Right.
I'm not going to do those things. I'm not going to compromise my community to do that. So when it comes to monetization side, I think it's one about understanding, like, what is your unique value add, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
when I started finance, like I told you, I have a lot of imposter syndrome because, well, who's going to listen to me talking about
Yeah.
personal finance when you got the Budgetista and all these other people who
Yeah.
are, you know, who already have these big phones and these
Mm-hmm.
big platforms, right? Who is going to listen to little old me, right? But what I felt like started to differentiate me was how I approach things, the way that I created my content, the voice that I provided to, honestly, a lot of the same topics that many of us talk about, right? So I think it's one unique value add is to really being focused on fostering that community. I think a lot of times we think, oh, get rich quick. And don't realize that social media, so much of that, right? So much of the psychology behind marketing that leads people to buy on social media is still that like, trust factor, right?
There
if
you
you
go.
don't have that, right? If you don't have that, how are you going to be able to convince someone to spend their hard-earned money, especially in a pandemic, on what you have to offer, right? So I think when it comes to monetization side, I think we should all think about who are we hoping to serve? What problem are we hoping to serve? And what's our unique value add? Because again, the way that I teach investing and traveling may be very different than another person. And someone might resonate with the way that I educate versus another platform, right? And then honestly, like, you know, like what some of my sisters are saying in the comments, like the money will flow, right? So
That's
the monetization
facts. Yeah.
will flow. And I'm also a big believer of shooting my shot, right? Like, so case in point today, I was actually featured on The Points Guy, and they're a huge travel
Congrats.
blog. Thank you. But they have a weekly series where they were just like featuring, you know, people that you should follow in the travel space. And when I saw it, I pitched myself. I literally DM'd them and was just like, hey, I feel like I would be a good fit for this. Here's some of like my, you know, highest reaching posts I think relate to this. And almost immediately they were like, yes, thank you. Let's, you know, let's get you into the next week's, you know. So I think there's also that element. I think when we think monetization, I think a lot of times we think, oh, these brands or these people are going to reach out to me. But no, when you a small fish, you got to pitch yourself and have that strategic audacity to say, hey, I've done these things. I know what my value add is. I know who my community is. I know what I have to offer, what my value is. XYZ brand over here. Here's why you should be working with me. So many of, you know, the features and the opportunities that have come my way have honestly come from either people just finding me on Instagram and just being like, hey, like, I just really appreciate what you have to say, or me putting myself out there and just saying, hey, you may not even know who little FlyNanced is, but here's why you should.
Yeah, I love that. And shooting your shot, having confidence for young entrepreneurs right now who may not be confident, right? How do you build up that confidence to say, yo, I can reach out to this brand? How do you do it?
Ooh, you know, so I will say the confidence piece is something that I feel like I haven't struggled with in a long time. That's not true, right? I told you I had imposter syndrome, but I think, you know, I think when you get hungry enough and when you realize that that life that you want is on the other side of you pushing past that fear and maybe knocking on a few doors and getting a few rejections, then I think it starts to rewire your mindset, like truly and honestly, right? When I realized like, wow, what is literally keeping me from being in a position where I can be a full-time entrepreneur, where my passive income is generating more than what my 9-to-5 is, where I can be in a position where I can say, this is how I spend my time, where I spend my time, right? Truly experiencing that time wealth, that location independence is on the other side of me, one, raising my hand and speaking up, and two, putting in the work. That was when things started to change, right? And then when I started to actually see the results of the work that I was doing, right? Because it's like one thing to say when you're starting at ground zero, like, yeah, pitch yourself and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But when you start to see people coming out of the woodworks to say, hey, you don't even know who I am, but you have impacted me in these ways, right? Like really starting to see the impact of what my work was doing. And not only my work, but the community of other people. Many of the creators who I've pinged into this room are here, right? When I really sit back and think about the impact that we have collectively, it's like, oh, well, you know, if XYZ brand rejects me now, it's their loss. Because when they come back, my rate is going to be so much higher. And that is on period, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think, honestly, where the confidence also comes from is aligning myself with people who can pour into me, right? So I'm a big believer, and, you know, I see my best friend of the Soul Reasons down here. I'm a big believer in cultivating those relationships to take care of your mental health, right? Whether that's through a counselor, a therapist, a life coach, right? I recently started investing in business coach, right? So for me, it's also important to get those affirmations and like that support from other people to say, oh girl, you playing too small, right? And having to be reminded of that by other people who, one, have the receipts, and two, have the capacity to pour into me to say, keep going, keep striving, and do it this way, and have you considered it this way, right? So I think all of that helps build that confidence, right? I think, one, realizing that life that you want is attainable on the other side of experiencing some of that rejection.
Yeah.
Or what I like to say, what is rejection is just nothing but redirection, okay?
That's facts.
And then two, having that support system to say, to have those people who are going to tell you, go bigger, go harder. That actually, like, we like that. We happy about that. But also, what about this? What about that door that you're too afraid to open? Let's explore that. Let's unpack that.
I
All
love
of
that.
that relates.
Yeah, hey, that's real. And you know, you talking about having therapy, business coach. Can you speak on the importance of maintaining a good mental headspace? Because when it comes to running a blog, a business, working, how do you try to balance all of those moving parts?
Absolutely. I mean, taking care of your mental health is paramount to any of this, right? I can't show up authentically as a creator if I'm not allowing myself space to unpack what I'm going through, recharge, rest. I mean, literally in the last week in the United States, there was yet another mass shooting. Like, that impacts our ability to show up and you know, put on these happy faces on social media, right? So absolutely, taking care of your mental health is paramount, and really finding, like, what are those systems that work well for you. I'm definitely somebody who likes to talk, who needs to journal, who needs to, like, you know, kind of recite those voice notes to myself to just release what it is that I'm feeling, what it is that I'm struggling with. So, you know, I think that if anyone is in a position where you really want to be a creator, you want to have a platform, you want to be popping, monetizing, putting yourself out there, acknowledging that, like, not all this stuff is cute and glamorous, right? Like, and especially having a brand where your face is potentially going to be the face of that brand. Now we're talking about a whole other level of having to be able to stand comfortably on your own 2 feet, right? In those times where people want to troll you, where people want to say ridiculous stuff about the work that you're doing, when people want to downplay what you're doing, right? Me being a traveler during the pandemic, I can't tell you how many messages I get from people being like, oh, like, really? Like, how about you? Like, you know, like, just all kinds of stuff. And I think that, you know, when you don't take care of your mental health, all of that can continue to weigh on you. So absolutely, I'm a believer in that. And when it comes to finding that balance, I'll be honest, I struggle with it. I am, like, literally just getting out of a few weeks where I was burnt out. That was like what it was. Like, I was feeling like I was like, yeah, hitting my stride. But then I realized I was not actually prioritizing enough time for myself. I was going from working a 9 to 5, that's really an 8 to 6, and then turning around and doing like a 6 to 1 a.m. type thing, and just doing that cycle week after week, in addition to, you know, acknowledging that, hey, I am now living in a whole new place, the culture shock that comes with living outside the United States for the first time. It hit me when, you know, after a very big and public moment, right, related to that point around your mental health, where, you know, another creator, you know, tried to humiliate me, and we was like, not on our watch. You're not going to do that. And all the outpouring of, like, support, of questions, of all of this, like, it really, it was so exhausting. Like, so, I mean, that was like 3.5, almost a month ago. And I'm now just feeling like I'm in a space where, like, I can create again, where I don't feel like so exhausted, right? And I know for myself what burnout looks like, because it's when the creative juices aren't flowing. It's when I'm procrastinating, and it's just like, you got that deadline. Why are you waiting until that last moment? It's that, not feeling the same joy around the work that I do, right? When it starts to feel like more of a chore, that's when it's just like, okay, I'm not doing enough to recharge, right? So like I posted today, I think one thing that I'm definitely going to start including more into my routine as a business owner, just as a working woman, is creating more blocks of time where I can take breaks, right? Because I am someone who will say yes to everything. Like, go, go. Yes, I want to do it. Okay, yeah, that. Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah, okay, thanks for thinking of me, blah, blah, blah. And then you wake up and you're just like, oh, wow, it's been weeks since I actually unplugged, right? So let's normalize adult spring breaks. I don't think enough of us actually do
That's
that.
real.
And after that Q1 grind, before Q2 starts, you need to take some time for yourself to just unplug. And when I say unplug, I don't mean just saying, okay, yeah, I took off my 9 to 5 and I'm gonna focus on this project, or now I have all this free time, I'm gonna do that random project that I've been putting off. No, like literally just do nothing. Like potentially don't travel, potentially just sit and rest and lay down and, like have some time for yourself where you're not constantly chasing that next deadline, right? I think that's something that I have to remind myself. And something that I learned from actually a career break coach, Rashida D. I had a consultation with her the other day. Something that she kind of poured into me is this idea that as I'm continuing to grow out what I want my business to look like, I need to also carve out time, even within my business, for days where I don't work, right?
Yeah.
And that this idea of, oh yeah, I'm gonna just take off 2 weeks in XYZ month, it's probably not as realistic for someone like me who is more of a like, I drive off of some of that like busyness almost sometimes, right?
Yep.
That actually what might be more advantageous is saying, on Thursdays, I do not schedule any consultations. I don't schedule any interviews, right? And having that exist week over week so that I always have that day where I'm not obligated to be anywhere for anyone else besides myself. So that is something that, when it comes to balance, I'm slowly integrating more into my schedule to say, okay, even if I have this 9 to 5 now, I won't always be like this, but how can I carve out rest just like more proactively and not always, retroactively trying to recharge after I've experienced that burnout.
That's really good. And you said something important. And also I see it in the comments, adult spring breaks. That's a really good thing. Right now is everybody's trying to, go out, get back outside. Last year, everybody was in Tulum. So now when it comes to traveling, how do we travel on a budget, and how do we travel effectively?
Yeah. When it comes to traveling on a budget or effectively, right? Because I'm also about dispelling this idea of like what budget travel is, right? Because I think sometimes when we think of budget travel, we think of like schlepping it, backpacking, staying in like ridiculously, I'm gonna say chaotic situations just to save money. But budget travel can also look like having that luxury vacation that fits your budget that you can afford, right? So I think one way that we can start to do that, and I think as more people are thinking about, okay, wanting to go back to travel, is create that travel fund. I don't know how many times I'm gonna say it, but create that travel fund, that separate checking or savings account that you will now have as a place to prioritize your funds towards travel. We all want to travel, but how many of us are actively and consistently saving to travel, right? Like, so it's like you want to catch flights, but like, where is the money coming from?
Yeah.
Facts. Because even if it's like, even if you're going to travel hack, even if you have some kind of, plug where your travel is offset or it's low cost, there are still costs that are incurred when you travel, especially now in this post-pandemic, right? We are still in a pandemic, right? Think about the costs that incur when you got to pay for a PCR or antigen test, right? Where you have to pay for, just other things that you have to keep in mind, right? Potentially having to keep money aside in the event that What if you travel and then test positive for COVID and can't go
Eesh.
back to the United States?
Yeah.
Do you have that buffer? Do you have some kind of
Mm-hmm.
system in place so that travel is not putting you into debt, right? So I think having that travel fund is something that we can all do, we can all prioritize. And no matter how much you make, you can start prioritizing saving for travel in a way that's going to make sense for your budget and your goals, right? For someone like me who, is living abroad and travels pretty aggressively, I'm probably saving a different amount than someone who's just like, I want to take a nice trip this summer with my girls, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I think really sitting down with yourself and being realistic around like, what can I afford and how much can I start to prioritize towards travel so that when things are open and we want to be outside, travel doesn't become a site of financial worry for me.
That's good stuff. And two, like, how do we save, right? Because I've seen people come to All-Star Weekend here in Atlanta, not be able to go back home, posting
Ooh.
GoFundMe's, things like that. So how do we make sure that we aren't placed in bad situations like that?
Yeah, I mean, starting to save really starts with understanding like what is your money picture, right?
Yeah.
When you look at how much money you bring in through your income sources and how much expenses you have, like that's where it starts, right? I think budgets have a bad rep, but at the end of the day, I don't know no wealthy people who don't know the difference between what's coming in and what's going out of their
It's real.
accounts, right? Like,
Yeah.
so whether you want to have a pen and paper type budget, whether you want to have something super fancy like a whole dashboard,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have an understanding of how much do you have coming in consistently and what do you owe? What obligations do you have? What expenses do you have, right? That was part of the emphasis of why I wanted to get debt free. It's because
Mm-hmm.
I realized that, whoa, I'm sitting here paying at one point in my life, not so long ago, my monthly payments just to maintain my, and not go into default on my personal loans and student loans was over $600 a month.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when I thought about the money that I'm literally just paying these banks just to not even put a dent in my debt, but just to not go into default, not, owe them a late fee, not get charged a penalty, is $600 a month. What could I be doing with that money? I could be
Yeah.
building wealth with that money.
Mm-hmm.
I could be traveling with that money, right? $600 in a year, that's $5,000 that I was just paying in minimum payments.
Mm-hmm.
So when you really sit down and think, okay, if my income is $3,000 a month, but my expenses are $4,700, something is wrong. Something is off, right? I think that is where we have to start. So many of us don't understand that we live beyond our means until we sit down and realize, oh, I can't afford all this stuff. And that was a hard thing that I had to realize.
Yeah.
I can't afford to go out and keep up with this lifestyle in New York City that I thought I could, right? I thought I could afford it, right? Oh, because my bills are paid and I got a good salary. But do you have anything to show for it? You don't have no savings. If an emergency happens, you SOL.
Mm.
If you in a situation where you getting paid just to pay down debt from last month, you living paycheck to paycheck. If you in a situation where your homegirl or homeboy can't be like, yo, like, this trip is coming up in a couple months, you trying to go, and you actually don't really know, can I afford that? That's where it starts, right? So before we can even talk about savings, really understand our money picture. And then when it comes to figuring out what that looks like in terms of our income versus expenses, that's when we can start to say, where can I prioritize from a savings perspective, right? Because, right, if we in that picture where, okay, $3,000 a month is how much is coming in, but my expenses are $47,000, can I get my expenses down to $2,700 a month? So that now I have a $300 buffer that can start to become my savings gap, right? That's maybe where I start. And then for me, it's like automation. I was never somebody that could just go into my accounts and just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna just move this money into savings and it's gonna be great. No, the same way I'm moving that money into savings, the same way I'd be moving it back out, right? And it would be like, yeah, I'm saving for my emergency fund. And then it would get to like August and I would be like, wow, I don't have anything here because I've been moving the money back and forth, right? Yeah. That's not saving, right? Saving is like really setting that intentional goal and saying, I'm going to automate this. This is going to flow from my paycheck and I don't touch it. It's in a separate account. I don't see it. It grows. But I know that based on the plan that I made for myself, I can still take care of the other things I need to take care of without feeling that like pressure to go into this other account and pull out money that's honestly just going to hurt my future self. So I think when it comes to savings is absolutely understanding what our money picture is, and then taking it step by step, right? I think people look at me and think, oh, it's just something that happens overnight. No, it's not, boo-boo, right? Before I even became debt-free and could be in a position where I could save, invest, and pay down debt and travel, what y'all didn't see was over a year of me working with a financial coach and really like working in private on some of the things that I wanted to do, right? I think we have become accustomed to this instant gratification lifestyle. And when it comes to our personal finances, I think I want to see more of us extend grace to ourselves. Like if you was in, if you was in a situation where only a couple months ago you was living paycheck to paycheck, don't then put yourself up for, okay, I'm gonna save 10 grand in the next few months, right? Like break down those goals and make them smart, measurable, actionable, and achievable, right? Like don't go from 0 to 100 because then you're gonna be right back down to 0. Trust me, that was me, right? Feeling like, oh, after a couple months, yeah, I got the hang of this. Boom, I'm gonna just put out a big goal for myself and then be upset with myself when I don't achieve it. But it's also like you didn't give yourself enough grace to say, this is where I'm at, this is where I want to be, and acknowledging that there are going to be steps along that way. So, one thing I would definitely recommend, there are a lot of people, saying like, preach, clap, clap, clap. I would also say, if anybody is like listening and potentially struggling, DM me because I would be happy to connect you with some like really awesome money coaches who are not financial advisors out here trying to like scheme you into opening accounts you don't need, but like truly someone who can help you create a budget that makes sense for you, like so that you can really start to understand what does living within your means look like, right? And then back to that conversation we just had, if you're in a position where you're just like, I need more money, then also understanding that like there are also people that can help you get to a point where you can start to monetize some of the things that you do know so that that gap becomes wider, right? That everything doesn't happen overnight.
That's powerful. And speaking on goals, you're someone who's been very transparent about your journey of becoming debt free, making an extra 30K, which is crazy. How did that feel, right, to start checking off some of those goals?
Woo! It felt amazing. I'm not even gonna hold you. It felt amazing. For me being someone who was really suffering in silence for years, no one knew what kind of debt situation I was in until I went public with FlyNanced, right? My own family didn't know. My closest friends didn't know, right? I was so used to, hiding behind this mask that I had it all together, that I was really like suffering and continuing to put myself into a darker hole. So as I started to really see my debt disappear and now being in a place where I don't owe nobody nothing, like, okay. And that's not to say that like I'm not still using credit cards, like I travel half. There are definitely things that I do, but like being in a place where like I have a buffer in my checking account, being in a place where like I don't look at my savings account and feel like, ooh, like if an emergency happens, I'm fucked, right? Like really being in a space where no, I'm not exactly where I want to be on all levels, but I am leagues ahead of the woman that I was only a few years ago. It feels so freeing. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm here in Mexico, because I felt like I was finally in that place where money was not holding me back from some of the things that I wanted to do. And when you experience that freedom, those are some of the things that you can do. You can start to shift your mindset to like, wow, what is it that my spirit is really calling for? And for me, it was truly, getting rid of my previous lifestyle and embarking on more of a journey of solo travel, of slow travel, right? But I couldn't do that, right? When I'm telling you that my monthly payments were over $600, I could not do that, right? I couldn't do that when I didn't understand what my spending triggers are. I couldn't do that when I didn't understand what a need versus a want was, right? So honestly, it's a feeling that I wish everyone who is listening or hears my voice could experience, just that level of freedom, knowing that you were getting closer to financial security is something that, I really think it's words can't even describe it.
That's great. And as somebody who lives out of the country now, how has that whole experience been for you so far?
Yeah, so this has definitely been a journey. It's been a self-actualization journey, a
Mm,
self-realization journey. You know, I've told this story a couple times, but let's
mm,
just say that I came to Mexico with like extra baggage that I had to free myself of, so to speak.
mm.
So, you know, coming here and really being in a place where I am starting to create that life that I want helped me realize that there were things that were in my life that just were not serving me, and weren't actually helping me get closer to where I wanted to be, right? Um, so it's been such a positive journey, honestly. I feel incredibly blessed, incredibly grateful to have this experience, to have this kind of privilege to be able to pick up my life and just be able to say, yeah, I'm gonna relocate to Mexico and I'm gonna figure it out. And oh, this job is playing, they can miss me or they about to get a pink slip. Okay. It's like who even does pink slips anymore? It's on 1990. You know, so for me, it's really been a great opportunity for me to test out, is this a lifestyle that I want? Yes. How can I get more of it?
I love that. And clearly, you're somebody who takes risks, moving out the country, traveling for creatives as well, who want to take a risk and they're struggling at that job. They hate it, but they have, a side business that they haven't fed into. How do you
Mm.
free yourself from that 9 to 5?
Woo. I will say I am still in a position where I'm not free from my 9 to 5s.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, kind of back to what I kind of mentioned earlier, for me, that was when I realized that I needed to invest in a business coach and why I felt like now was the right time for me to do that, right? Because for me, I felt that yes, I have a growing platform. It's incredible to see the amount of people who have like consistently follow me, engage with my content, whatever opportunities that I'm throwing my way. But it's also like I ain't really making the money that I could be making off this platform. And why is that, right? Because
Yeah.
I don't have a clear customer journey. Because like,
Mm-hmm.
do people really understand what it is that I have to offer? They understand my value and my packaging in a way that people make sense and see that there's a sense of urgency around, not just like, oh yeah, I'll get to it, but like, no, now I need this now, right? How
Mm-hmm.
can I better tell my story, right? And then how can I be in a position where, back to what we were talking about, like that strategic audacity, starting to pitch myself to brands that have the budget to be able to fund other parts of my business without me just relying on how many products can I sell, right?
Yeah, that's
Because,
it.
you know,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we forget, hello, there's a whole influencer industry over here that is looking for talented creatives of color like us, right? Like,
Mm.
look at all of these major brands that are starting to highlight and showcase
That's
Black and
real.
brown creatives. Like Nike just did a whole campaign where they were doing
Yes.
that, right? It's
Yes.
been incredible to watch, right?
Mm.
And I think sometimes, you know, LLC Twitter will have us thinking like, oh yeah, just sell 37 products. You'd be a, you know, six figures is only
And it's not that
$285 a
simple.
day. Right.
Yeah.
It's not that
Yeah.
simple. And also,
Yeah.
there is a whole other lane around here where we could be also supplementing and creating multiple streams of income as creatives. But if we so focus on, well, how much can I sell? Am I, you know, selling enough? We forget, oh, brands actually want to pay me to amplify their products. Like, why am I
Mm.
not getting a piece of that multi-billion-dollar industry, right?
Mm.
When they're looking for us, like they're looking for us, like it's a fact. They're
That's
looking for
real.
us. We
Yeah.
move the culture. Look at
Yeah.
all these platforms and how, you know, how is it common language to stay stimmy? It was started by a
Mm.
Black person, right? All of
Yeah.
these sites where,
Yeah.
you know, like brands continue to profit off of things that we add value, we add to the culture. We need to also get a piece of that, right? So
Mm.
when I think it comes to stepping away from your 9 to 5, for me it looked like I need to invest in someone who's going to help me get to that next level. One, two, am I doing everything in my power with this 9 to 5 to make this money stretch as much as possible, right? So for me, I shared in my story a couple of weeks, I was just like, I ain't feeling this job. What did I do? I went into my payroll setup and I started putting more money into my savings. saying, okay, if I need to walk away from this job and my business is not generating the income that I wanted to, do I have enough saved up in the event that I need to live off of my savings for a couple months, right?
Yeah.
And then I think 3, continuing to think about what are the skills that you have and how can you continue to refine and package those, right? I think sometimes we think of our 9 to 5s as like totally separate from like the work that we do in other places, but so much of those skills and so much of that knowledge we should be applying to our businesses. We should be applying to that, right? The same way you network to get a promotion, why are you not networking to get that collab, to get that brand deal, to get in front of those right people, right? It would be like totally like, I would be totally remiss if I made it seem like, oh yeah, FlyNanced just like showed up one day because I put in all the work, right? No, it's because I have been throughout this journey continually wanting to collaborate with people, raising my hand, smaller accounts, bigger accounts, anyone that I feel like we are talking about similar things. I like the way that you show things, right? Even Caleb, when you reached out to me, was just like, yo, let's get on live. I looked at a couple of your interviews and I was just like, oh, I love this. Oh, this is great journalism. Oh, this is going to be a really great conversation, right? Making ourselves open to that, right? And not thinking that we have to carve out and try to protect our little piece of the internet, right? That's ego, right? And that's not where the money flows.
That's great. That's great stuff. My guy Herman, he has a great question. Please talk about how you pay down your debt and any methods.
Yeah, so when it came to paying down my debt, like I said, I had to first understand what my money picture was, and 2, really understand how much I actually owe, right? So January 15, 2020 was the first time I ever sat down and added up, this is everything that I owe, right? Like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I got this credit card over here, I got this loan over here, yeah. But really sitting down and be like, oh, I owe $23,000 in debt. Ooh, oh, okay, right? Like having that clear number and understanding how much you owe, right? Was absolutely where it started, right? Then going back to understanding, okay, this is my income, these are my expenses. How much do I have left? Am I going to be able to hit my goal of becoming debt-free in a year based on this number? No, I was not, right? So that was when I started to realize, I need to make more money. And I just put it out there. I will be really honest. You mentioned a little bit that, like, yes, in 2020, I increased my salary by over $30,000. But I just kind of put it out there. I'll be really honest. I did not hustle with my resume. I wasn't putting it out to a bunch of different companies. It was literally like, the opportunity flew my way. It was a networking conversation that turned into, hey, you should really apply for this. We have an opening on our team. That turned into, okay, we want to give you this offer. And how about this? I got my offer the week before New York City went on shutdown. So it was a crazy couple of weeks at the end of March and April when I sent my boss that letter, like, yeah, this is my 2-week notice. And she was like, excuse me, what? And I was like, yeah, well, I mean, do y'all have a counter offer? Oh, no, y'all don't. Okay, well, bye. No heart, no love, right? So I think when it comes to methods, right, all of that, like, pre-work is important, right? Because I had an aggressive goal and I had to understand where the money was going to come from, right? One method is sending any windfall money towards your debt, right? So if you qualify for a stimulus check, like, if your expenses and your bills are paid for, really think about putting some of that money towards debt, right? Like, no, it's probably not going to feel as great as like flexing and buying something or putting it on a trip. But that was what I did in 2020 when I got a tax refund, when I got a performance bonus. I put that money towards debt, most of it towards debt. That's not to say I didn't give myself any to like enjoy, but I put most of that money that I wasn't expected. That's what is considered windfall money, towards debt. In terms of a method, I follow the debt snowball method because most of my debt, I didn't really have a ton of high interest debt, which we can talk a little bit about. So I follow the debt snowball method. I needed that momentum. I needed to say, okay, this one little balance is $350. I'm going to pay this off, and then I'm going to focus on the $700 balance. Then I'm going to focus on the $900 balance. Then I'm going to focus on the $1,200 balance, right? And that gave me the momentum to keep going. Another thing, the CARES Act was signed into law in March 2020. So my student loan interest was put into forbearance. That means I was not paying any interest on my student loans. I took advantage of that, you know, in a time where many people were like, oh, I'm not going to pay these student loans. Like, that's great. Okay, no interest, whatever. I was like, oh, no interest? Oh, that. So that means all my money that I'm going to put towards this principal is going to make the whole loan go down? Oh, we need all of this. Like, so that was something I was very intentional about. In terms of creative solutions, and I talked a little bit about this on my profile before, I had credit card debt. So I also looked into 0% APR balance transfers. That was a way of me taking some of this high interest debt where I'm getting, you know, charged potentially 20% or more in interest and move it on to a card like Discover It or Chase Freedom Unlimited, where now I had 15, 18, or 24 months to pay down that balance because it was a balance transfer and not get charged any interest, right? So that was also something that I did that was like a more of a creative hack. You absolutely have to have a strong credit score to be able to do that. But what that did was it helped me then say, okay, well, now I'm not going to be paying $97 a month in interest on this credit card debt. I'm going to put it on this 0% APR balance. And now I'm going to give myself that timeline to say this needs to be paid by the end of this promo offer. But now I have 15 months to pay down this $5,000 balance instead of, you know, it just sitting on that credit card and then you're looking up and the interest is charging you more than what you can pay down every month, right? So, you know, I think all of those methods helped. And then, you know, like what someone is saying in the comments, right? It's also about having to make some of those sacrifices, realizing like, I'm serious about getting this debt paid off. That means I need to forego some of these luxuries that maybe I've had in my lifestyle. And that was like what it was for me. So for me, it looked like continuing to live pretty much as disciplined and frugally as I'd ever lived. But again, I was also still saving for travel. So those became those moments that I started to look for, right? Like I traveled to Dominican Republic and Mexico in 2020. But those were things that I began to look forward to. Instead of feeling like, oh my God, I'm putting all my money towards debt and I hate it, I'm miserable. Instead of now being like, okay, I'm making this short-term sacrifice, right? Like what is being said right now. The short-term sacrifice to get that moment of reward, but that biggest reward happening when I was able to pay off all those balances. So that was a little bit about kind of my methods and what worked for me.
I love that. And earlier you said something that was very, very important. You were talking about how influencers, they'll be traveling and people don't know that this person either got the trip paid for or they're paying like 5 stacks. And then we're on the other side trying to keep up and we don't even know that their stuff is completely different. So how do we not try to copy other people when it comes to traveling?
Look, I'm gonna just say, you know, a couple friends have reached out to me and were just like, oh, have you connected with XYZ influencer? Like, I saw that they're into him, and I'm just like, no, they don't want to connect with me. They don't want to connect with me. I'm not posting the lit content. I'm not out here staying in these resorts that cost $4,000 a night. I'm not out here, you know, doing these press trips. Like that's not to say maybe I won't do it, but right now that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I feel like is important for me to share on FlyNanced, right? So when I think it comes to not copying people, I think it's one, really understanding like what is it about those experiences that you want to experience? Is it you want to experience luxury? Is it you want to experience those places? Right? Because I think sometimes we've gotten to a place where travel has become so commodified that we don't even know why we're doing it no more, right?
That's
like,
facts.
why are you really? Why do you really want that experience? Why do you really want to go to that place, right? So I think really understanding that, really asking yourself that question, like, do you just want to go somewhere to like take from this place because you want those fancy pictures in front of like whatever, or is there something deeper there? Because if it's not, then maybe that's not a place you should be prioritizing, right? I think another thing is really just doing a bit more research. I think sometimes we get laser focused when we see images, and especially on Instagram, right? We're just like, yes, I need to go there. Oh, I'm not going to be satisfied until I do that, right? For me, that's something I think about often because I really want to go to Kenya and I really want to go to Giraffe Manor. It's like this like hotel where like the giraffes are like the reserve is right around the hotel. So like there's like they let you feed them, and they'll
That's
pop
dope.
their heads through the windows. Like, it looks really beautiful. And then as I'm talking to travel agents, they like, yeah, so rooms there cost about $600 a night. And I'm just like, to feed some
Each.
giraffes?
Yeah.
Maybe this is not something that like means as much to me if I can still, have the experience in another way that is still respectful of the animals, but it also isn't like now draining my pockets just to say, oh yeah, I went to Giraffe Manor. And like, for what reason? To post on Instagram so people can be like, oh, that's so cool. Like,
Yeah.
is that really the value that you need out of it, or is there something deeper? So when it comes to doing a bit more research, right, I think it's also like, okay, if there's specific destinations that you do want to visit, really looking into what are some of the ways that you can do it at the budget that you have it, right? Because remembering that social media, we only post in our highlight reels, right?
There
So
you
if
go.
you're looking at those views and you're like, that's amazing, and maybe it's a resort that you can't afford, understand, like, maybe that resort may have day passes. Maybe they have an
Mm.
open restaurant where you could just go for lunch, get those views,
Yep.
have that experience, but then, go back to the place where you can afford so that your money
Mm.
can stretch further. I can't tell you, especially being in Tulum, how many money sucks there are, especially around the beach, where like people are out here flexing, dropping bread on stuff that's just like, yikes, right?
Mm.
And I think that's been part of the reason why I felt empowered with FlyNanced to show other ways that like we can travel affordably here in Tulum, but also support local businesses that like actually need the support versus giving
Yeah.
our money to these international businesses in the beach zone that really don't give a fuck about nothing. They don't give a fuck about the local culture. They don't give a fuck about the people. They don't care about the environment, right?
Mm.
How can we also think, especially those of us who have that passport privilege, how can we also put our dollars towards literally the local people who are here who are struggling, right?
Mm.
Like literally make another turn instead of going down that beach, and you will see many of the people who work in these hotels and resorts, the conditions that they live in. And this is still Tulum, right? So I think that's important. Like doing a bit more research, really understanding, are there ways that I can support local businesses, and still get those views, still get those experiences, but find that balance.
I love that. And two, how do we stay safe when we go travel? If it's out of country and things like that, with the flights, the hotels, all of that stuff.
Yeah, so I think from staying safe from a COVID perspective, I think really being intentional about what countries you travel to and understanding what are their requirements.
Mm.
A lot of us are flexing to come to Mexico, and I get the question a lot, oh, what's the COVID precaution in Mexico? Well, if you're really worried about like potentially getting or passing COVID, you should not be coming to Mexico. Like that, I mean, that's literally what I tell people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be like brash about it, but it's also
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what do you think could happen when you come to a country where the borders are open? Like the
Yeah.
borders are open.
Yeah.
The president of Mexico denied the existence of coronavirus
Mm.
for months, and
Mm.
then pretty much said that he could use Santeria to cure it, and like doesn't believe in any of the like conventional medicine behind it, right? So it's like if that is really concerning, you're really concerned about the health risk, Mexico should not be a place that you want to visit. When there
Mm.
are also islands in the Caribbean, like Barbados, for example, that have very stringent requirements. So that if you're going to travel around Barbados, that you and everyone else who's on that flight has now had to, level up to a certain level of testing requirement. There's a
Yeah.
quarantine requirement, right? You have to get tested before you get on that plane, get
Mm.
tested again when you're in that airport, and then get tested again a couple days later, right? That
Right.
if that is really a concern around health safety, then keeping that in mind in terms of where you travel, right?
Mm.
So, and then I think just broader generally when it comes to being safe, especially as Black travelers, I think that sometimes I don't see this in Tulum, but I think we got to be okay keeping a low profile, acknowledging that we not in Harlem, we not in
Mm.
Manhattan, we not in Atlanta. So when you
Mm.
out here flexing, making big scenes, throwing your cash around, like you attract a certain level
That's
of
real.
attention, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm always going to attract a certain level of attention because I'm a curvy Black woman
Mm-hmm.
who does not dress conservatively. But
Yeah.
when somebody sees me on a bike with my with this little thing, ain't nobody nobody running up on me trying to, what are you taking? What are you taking, hombre? What are you taking? I'm not even a good target. You clearly see I don't have no money. You see these dusty little chocolates I got on? I'm not the one. But I'm also
Yo.
not out here with like all the jewelry, all the
Right.
designer stuff, right? Like that's I don't need that, right? So I think especially as Black travelers, we have to, you know, have that situational awareness and understand, especially when we come to, you know, not only developing countries, but cities like Tulum, where there is such stark inequality, acknowledging that when you have that certain je ne sais quoi about you, you attract a certain level of attention, right? Because then we can't also then turn around and be mad when like locals want to get over on us. But it's also like, well, you flexing, you Gucci down, so
And they trying to get some bread.
then you can pay this $30 taxi, but it really only costs $7. But you don't know nothing, so I'm gonna tell you $30, right? Like it's like, you know, like, and this is not to shame anyone, but I think it's something I don't think a lot of us think about. And then we expect to be treated in certain ways when that just doesn't add up, right? When it doesn't add up, when it's like, okay, well, you have about several $1,000s of jewelry and designer things on. What you mean you can't pay this $30 taxi? What you mean you can't tip me on this bill that costs $500? Like, what do you mean, right? And absolutely, that means the same when it comes to being safe. Like it's not the United States, right? And I don't think that we should think that we have the same kind of privileges and access that we do in other countries when we travel.
That's real. That's real. And speaking on Black travelers, I feel like our generation age group is like the first for Black people to travel like across the globe. What benefits do you think that we can gain from traveling, seeing other cultures, other countries, things like that?
Yeah, I think perspective is something that is needed. Just widening our perspective, really seeing how big the world is and how a lot of the things that we've internalized as people living in the United States, just that's not really how the world works or has to work, right? I think too, really understanding that I think some of the images that we're kind of fed around anti-Blackness, especially in the U.S. and like the history with like racialized slavery that the U.S. has, it's not really how Black people like. It's not. That's not to say anti-Blackness is not global, but I do think that I have had very positive experiences in countries that were otherwise very homogeneous, right? Where you would expect like, oh, people are going to treat you all types of crazy ways, but outside of just people just being genuinely curious, like wow, just being like, you know, not to marvel at you like you're a sideshow freak, but just generally like, I've never met someone like you. Like, I have so many questions. I'm curious. I like, what are you doing around here? You know, I think that education is something that like we can benefit from, like really showing people that like we are more than these stereotypes and these tropes, right? Really showing people that we are just as human as they are, right? That we all have those same needs and wants and desires out of life. And I think for us, the education around the world, again, being so much bigger than I think the images that we're also sold, the ideas of success that we're also told to emulate behind. I think when you start to travel around the world and really see that most of the world is not living on the conditions that I think many of us aspire to, this quote unquote American dream. I think I think many of us also realize like, maybe I don't need all of this stuff in excess. I don't need all these material things. I don't need all this like flashiness that maybe is a status symbol in the US. In the grand scheme of things, do I have my health? Do I have like a community of people who are looking out for me? Do I have access to clean drinking water and like fresh food? Like those become the things where you're just like, oh wait, this is important. You know, for me as someone who's working towards financial freedom, before I kind of like came to Mexico, I had this idea like, yeah, I want to, you know, I'm working up to $2.5 million. That's like my fire number. That's like the number I'm working towards to feel like, yes, financial freedom. When I hit this number, boom. I get to Mexico and realize, wait, I don't need all that money. Like, what do I need all that money for? Like, what? Like, that's not to say, okay, that I will just be taking all my money out and not invest. But feeling like I just need so much wealth for myself, coming to other countries and realizing that I can live on significantly less. I can be a part of a community where I can rely on other people and we can be a sustainable collective, right? that I don't have to just like carve out this piece for myself and try to protect and hoard it all that I can. That can be a part of a community where we look out for each other, where we share resources, right? Like that is generally what how the world operates, right? And you know, that collective economics, right? Realizing that like, okay, when it comes to all of this, I actually don't need all of this. I don't actually
Yeah.
like, I can rebuke some of these like ideals when it comes to like Western capitalism, right? That like actually don't serve me, and I don't need them to have a high quality of life or have like a great life in other parts of the world. So I think that was also definitely a big learning moment for me, realizing that like, whoa, when I really think about how much I would spend and try to live off of the United States, it's like almost like ridiculous. Then putting that in perspective and living in places like Tulum and realizing like I can really tailor down my lifestyle from a financial perspective and still have a very rich and meaningful life.
That's amazing. And so far, I know you've traveled to so many different places, but what's been the best place that you've traveled to so far?
Kayla, this is a hard question.
All right.
I don't know. This is a hard question. You know, I think when I think about like some of my favorite places, like from a culinary perspective, definitely Japan is up
Okay.
there. When I think about some of my favorite places where I experienced the diaspora, right? Where like me being a Black American woman and going to other places and feeling like, whoa, like this is like, you know, like all of my identities are coming to the forefront because I'm looking at somebody who looks just like me, but we speak totally different languages.
Yeah.
We are citizens of different countries. We have totally
Yeah.
different perspectives.
Yeah.
I think Colombia was a great example of that. Cuba was a great example of
Yeah.
that. South Africa was a great example of that. I mean, in South Africa, when I was in the township, they used to come up to me and speak to me in Kosa. I can't even click my tongue. And then get so mad when I was just like, I don't understand. I thought you were so-and-so from Kailicha. You know, like that was such an amazing experience. Or like, you know, having people like come up to me and like be like, wait, are you so-and-so from XYZ place? And I'm like, no. And then when they heard to hear my voice and be like, you're American? Like, oh, tell me more about yourself. Like, are you single? Like, are you married? Like, that was also like an interesting experience, right? And then I think, you know, to that point around just like, I think a place that really opened my eyes and had me rethink my own assumptions about places was definitely Vietnam. I went to Vietnam thinking like, Vietnam, I don't even know if I want to be in Vietnam. Like, you know, all these ideas about Vietnam, you know, the Vietnam War and all of these just like very limited perspectives. Went to Vietnam and loved it. Okay, like lived with a Vietnamese family who they didn't know nothing about Black people, but they taught me a lot. You know, taught me a lot about just, you know, how to exist in Vietnam and, you know, and being in a place that is so homogeneous, but never feeling like, you know, people were going out of their way to harm me. More so people were like, just curious, like, would drive out in the Mopac, like, is that a Black person? Like, you know, and that just kind of being an experience and realizing that like, wow, maybe a lot of these assumptions that I had about this place were unfounded. And totally just kind of like pumped by Western media with no real basis. Like I have no reason to fear these places, that I should embrace these places.
That's dope. And for people who want to travel, but they're like somewhat scared of it, what words of advice would you have for them?
Oof, I think if you are feeling like you want to travel more but are afraid to, start in your own backyard. I think sometimes we think travel means getting on a jet and flying 8 hours, but travel can also look like exploring your own backyard. I think especially now where so many local businesses really need our support to continue to survive. It's thinking like, okay, what are those neighborhoods that are in your own city that you just like haven't checked out? Like, try to support a new small business that you haven't considered, right? Think about what are those like smaller towns in your state that aren't so far away that you could just go for a day trip and just be like, okay, well, I saw this, right? Something that I was like kind of doing before I relocated to Mexico was also like trying to see as many big cities around the US, right? Because I think also like, I don't think enough of us think about domestic travel, but it's also like, it's lit to be able to say you've been to most of the big cities in the US. Like, have you been to Dallas? Have you been to Chicago? Have you been to New Orleans? Have you been
Mm,
to New York? Have you been to Philadelphia, right? Have
mm,
you been to some of these cities where there are thriving Black communities?
yeah.
There are, all kinds of incredible arts and culture and restaurant scenes. And all of that is going to continue to
Mm,
explode post-COVID, right? Like, that also being something that, like, we should normalize, because when I tell you, we probably at the end of this more so, but these flight deals to travel domestically have been going crazy. Have you
yeah.
been to Denver? Have you been to Salt Lake City? Have you
Yeah.
been to San Francisco? Have you been to
Mm,
LA? Right? Like,
mm,
acknowledging that, like, hit up some of your friends that live in some of these other cities and just be like, yo, take me around to some of the places that, like, you like are off the beaten path. Like, that is traveling. I can't tell you how many times I've been to cities where it's like, yeah, I did the touristy thing, and then I go back with somebody who's from there, and they're like, you didn't even go to none of the good places. Let me take you to boom, boom, boom. And it's just like, whoa, like,
yeah.
okay, word. That's literally how Chicago became one of my favorite American cities, where I'm just
Mm,
like, yo,
yeah.
Chicago
Same.
is lit, okay?
Same. Same. Yeah. I love
Chicago
Chicago as
is
well.
lit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like having different people, like other, like different friends take me to different parts of Chicago,
Mm,
also helped me really like appreciate like the city and how diverse it is and how resilient the Black folk are from that, like are from Chicago. And like, so I think if you're afraid to travel, also thinking about where can you go in your own backyard.
mm,
Where can we go in our own country that
mm.
like are also exciting, right? Y'all just saw how excited I was talking about Chicago. I
Yeah.
can't wait till I can touchdown to Chi-Town again, okay? Summertime to Chi. Come on. So I think also, just expanding our ideas of like what travel is. And then I think creating different moments where we can travel around. Like, maybe if you are like, I think some of us who are like approaching 30 millennials, like, when's the last time you went on a family vacation? When's the last time,
Mm,
like, you and, like, if your parents or grandparents are still living, like, went somewhere? Like, create those moments. Like, we adults now, like, no
yeah.
one is creating the memories for us. We got to create the memories for ourselves with the people while we still have the people that we love around us, right? So, thinking about those things, I think, obviously we know when it comes to, like, girls' trips and vacations and things, but I think sometimes, like, we forget other people in our lives, those other moments that like are worth, like, when it's safe to travel. Let's think about coming together. Let's plan that
Mm,
family reunion.
yeah.
Let's, if you had a group of friends in college or grad school that's just like, dang, we haven't gotten together in a while, let's like try to meet up in one of these cities and just like get a house. And it don't have to be a big itinerary, but let's just like come together, be around each other when we can safely, right? I think let's also expand our ideas around travel being those moments too.
That's amazing. And when it comes to traveling, sometimes with influencers and content, I often, always see white people being pushed, but not black people being pushed when it comes to
Mm,
content, right? When it comes to the creations, how do we make sure
yeah.
that we're represented properly in those spaces?
Yeah, I think we have to continue to do what we talked about a little bit earlier.
Hmm.
Advocate for ourselves, and not feel like we have to wait for those people to come find us, right? Actually something that I'm learning and being exposed to is that whole side of like the business behind influencing. I was actually just selected as a mentee for the DBA and your management mentorship program. They
Oh,
created this virtual mentorship program for Black creators, micro influencers, as they described it, for us to really be able to learn some of the
mm,
skills and some of the more like tactics behind the business of influencing, right? So when I think it comes to like how can we show up more in these spaces, I think one, we have to feel that we are not in competition with one another, right?
right.
I feel incredibly blessed being, especially in the personal finance community, that so many of the like women of color, Black women that I'm in community with, we really look out for each other. And if there are opportunities that come our way that like maybe we don't have capacity for, I'll send it to my sister over here. I
Yeah.
haven't seen her get on a panel in a while. She needs to
Mm,
do it.
mm,
I don't have capacity to this. I want you to have this.
yeah.
Or when we're in those conversations, being understanding like, well, who else have y'all like? Who else is on your like list? And can I suggest some other creators that maybe have not been on your radar? But I mean, clearly, if y'all talking to me, you value what I have to say. So then let
Right.
me put on my sisters and brothers who are also in this space, right? I think we can do more of that. We can really collaborate and feel like even when we're in these meetings and when, you know, and when that brand or XYZ person on the other side is saying, what questions you have, ask me the question, who else have you pitched this campaign to? And if I feel like I don't have a good sense of the people that are there, have y'all consider XYZ person over here because she's a dope creator. Our audiences overlap and she has high engagement, right? That's one thing that we can do. We have to continue to advocate for ourselves. If we don't know how to do it, connecting with the people who can, who are black, brown, white, or whatever. Because one thing for sure, being a mentee in this program, my mentors are white women who know what the fuck they talking about, right? And I'm gonna leverage everything that they tell me and be able to take myself and my people to that next level, right? So I think we have to also be open to the fact that like it's okay to learn from people that don't look like us, who may have the network access and experience that we need to get to the next level. And then I think 3, continue to call out the brands, right? If there are brands that we really feel like we support, we put our dollars behind, we like giving free advertising exposure to, really not being afraid to say, hey, XYZ brand, I have tagged you all in multiple posts. Here's what the response has been. My community and I are looking at y'all in terms of like, what are you doing? What have y'all done since George Floyd? What have y'all done since like Blackout Tuesday, right? And hold these brands accountable. And when we get those opportunities sent to us where brands essentially don't want to pay us, something I've had to do is like not just write off brands, but really like respond back and say, you know, I cannot accept this, but I also want you to acknowledge what it is that you're doing, right? I had a very big financial media company with millions of subscribers and followers reach out to me to essentially do some stuff for free. They use the term barter. Let's barter our services for one another.
They try to
And
finesse.
they really tried to finesse. And I'm just like, I had to take that moment to say, you know what, as much as I want to write off these people, let me also use this as a moment to educate and advocate for someone else and let them know, I just want to let you know how this reads, that you're reaching out to black and brown creators in a pandemic, post George Floyd, post a whole racial relations revolution, and asking me to work for free? What did they say? Like, what? You know, and the response being from that company in particular being like, wow, thank you so much for educating us in this moment and making us realize that this was not the way that we want to show up. This is not what we want to reinforce. I think also we have to be okay sometimes doing that, calling these brands out, advocating, calling them out, calling them in, and saying, yeah, it's really not cute to be asking black and brown creators to do crap for free anymore. And here's why. You know, exposure does not pay my rent, and it's a pandemic. So
that's real.
What's
you know your value.
Okay, so I think all of those things we have to continue to do, and acknowledging that, right? These aren't things that are just happening because a few actors are bad, right? These are systemic issues, right? So it takes consistency. It takes us continuing to agitate, and it takes us also doing things like creating alliances so that we know, you know, are we being undercut? Is this a brand that is like, you know, doing this to multiple creators? Do we have the receipts to be able to say, these are the rates that we should be advocating for? This is what is expected. You know, I think those things are important too.
I love that. Lupe Diaz, that's a great question. Love the way that you travel. Where did you stay in Tulum?
Yeah, so I stay in Central Tulum because it is the least expensive.
Smart.
And more authentic, I think, to what Tulum is actually like, not just like the flashy beach area.
Resorts and stuff.
Yeah.
Got it. Cinneah, thank you so much for your time. Before we bounce, my very last question, where do you see yourself, your brand, FlyNanced, everything within the next 5 to 10 years?
That's a great question. In the next 5 to 10 years, I see FlyNanced being more than just a place of of empowering people to build wealth through travel, but really having the receipts to say that I've not only, you know, been able to work towards my first million, but here are the hundreds of other people who have followed in FlyNanced footsteps, and we are, you know, adding to the renaissance of Black and brown future millionaires. That's where I see my business going. I see my business allowing me to leave my 9 to 5, leave corporate America altogether, create passive income, not just for myself, but for people who look like me, retire my parents because my parents are still working, and ultimately make me rich AF. I hope in the next 5 to 10 years, I'm in a position where FlyNanced gets acquired by a bigger company because of the value that it's been able to provide and the voice that it's been able to add to the conversation. So that's where I see it going. You know, it's like, I think in the last few weeks I've realized that the work that myself and other people in my community are doing around pushing the envelope and bringing the conversation of generational wealth to our generation and Gen Z is so needed, because the people that we've been looking up to are dated, and they look into us on like, what should we be doing? How should we be keeping up? So this is really a moment for us to rise up and be those people, right? We are our ancestors. So we are our ancestors, and we are ancestors of the people that come after us. We have to act accordingly. So I see myself rising into that space and continuing to build that authority, and normalize, I think, this conversation that in the next 5 to 10 years, I hope that we don't even have to have, you know, the conversation around like, oh, money and travel, that's so different. Like, it should just be more commonplace.
That's facts. Thank you so much again for your time. You killed this interview. This will be saved. It'll be posted on YouTube. Okay. So once it's posted, I'll make sure to share it with you. But thank you so much. Keep doing what you're doing, and please stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Yes, ma'am.